have our consecration and begin the process of learning about what it means to be a Jew. And I think this last week has given all of us a lot of reflection on what it means to be a Jew. And I know that I need to speak in a PG milieu, if you will, tonight, and not share certain perspectives. We've got a lot of kids here. But I am not afraid, nor should any of our parents or grandparents be afraid of teaching our children from any age what it means to be a Jew. So you may get some questions when you go home tonight from services, and I'm okay with that. And any of us are okay if you call us on Monday and say, can you help us answer these questions? It was Yom HaShoah this week, Holocaust Remembrance Day. We had tragedy last Shabbat in Southern California. And then, like any Jew would do, we celebrated the beginning of the Jewish learning process for our children tonight and have 2 B'nai Mitzvah tomorrow morning, because the Jewish response to hatred and to terror and to pain and to tragedy is to learn and to teach and to study and to celebrate and to mark time with joy. That is how we roll. I wanted to give you an example of, I guess, some of my thoughts about last Shabbat, about what's happening in our country, within society regarding anti-Semitism, because I think that our children can handle the fact, as my grandmother used to say, Shretz Zanaid, that it is a great joy to be Jewish, but it's also hard work to be Jewish. And while we want to make everything sugar and spice and all things nice and warm and fuzzy for our kids, I think that we also want our kids, our children, our adults, our congregants, to acknowledge that the world can be very dark sometimes, and our job is to be an Or LaGoyim, a light to the nations, that we, as Jews, whether we're consecrants, first-time Jewish learners, or adult Jewish learners, that through our learning, Torah represents light, and that light can bring illumination to a dark world. I wanted to start with one thought. And I wrote a note just so I didn't get any of the statistics wrong here. In 1936, the Olympics were held in Germany, in Berlin, at the beginning of the Nazi era. And this was very, very important to Adolf Hitler, the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, to show off his completely irrational and illogical idea that if you had blonde hair and blue eyes and you were Aryan, an idea he made up out of nowhere, this whole concept, you were a superior being, you were a superior person. If you had blonde hair and blue eyes. There was a problem. The problem was a man named Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens, for those of you who like track and field, was one of the greats. He was fast, he was quick, he was athletic, and he won not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 gold medals in the 1936 Olympics. Now, this was a real problem for the Nazis. How do you explain, in the middle of this huge, irrational, illogical, political movement, cult-like political movement, explain to your people how a black person won 4 gold medals at your Olympics in your country? It's a tough call. So the same irrational, illogical, crazy people who created the idea that if you had blonde hair and blue eyes, you were a superior being, said that Jesse Owens won because black people are like animals. Black people are like horses. These are the words that they used. And no human being, even a blonde-haired, blue-eyed machine, German, could beat a horse in a race. And so what did they do? They created another irrational and illogical idea to beat down the idea that black people are animals, and animals are faster than humans, and no German could have won the races that Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals. Does that make any sense whatsoever? No. Now, those voices I just heard that said no already understand after just 1 year of religious school. And for some of you, after a few years of Channon preschool and religious school, what it means to be a Jew. That when you hear something that is hateful, that doesn't make any sense, that calling someone who's black an animal, or saying they're like animals and therefore no human being could beat them in the race, you know to say, no, that's not true. That's a lie. That's made up. It's not real. See, one of the most important ideas in what we're going to teach you for these next years in religious school is to say no when you hear or see something that is wrong. It's the same with anti-Semitism. Just as to justify losing these 4 gold medals in Berlin, Hitler's propaganda machine created this myth about Jesse Owens, there are people still today who make up lies, what we call conspiracy theories about Jews. The Jews have more money, and if they don't have more money, they control money, like literally control all the money. That Jews are really smart, but not in a good way. They're smart so they try to trick other people into doing and not doing things that they should and shouldn't do. They control the government, and they control the newspapers and the television stations. And that Jews have, throughout history, wanted to take over the world. That's what people who are anti-Semitic do. Do those things sound true? Do you think the people in this room and our relatives own all the money and make up all the news and tell everyone what to do and how to do it, and we trick people all the time? Is that true? No. See, to be a Jew is to know that when you hear something that's a lie, that's made up, that's not rational, you say, no, that's not true. So as we think about our consecrants, and we think about Jewish learning, and we think about Torah, and we think about Poway, and we think about Yom HaShoah, I hope we can all learn from our kids, and there are answers tonight. Part of being Jewish, a big part of being Jewish, is to say yes to life, and yes to celebrating, and yes to joy, and yes to learning, and yes to doing mitzvahs, and yes to giving tzedakah, and yes to learning Torah, and getting up in front of a congregation and chanting said Torah. But a big part of being Jewish is saying no. Hate is not okay. Making up stories to hate people is not acceptable. Saying things about other human beings that are not true, like they are smart and so they trick people, or they're fast because they're like animals, is wrong and needs to be spoken against. That part of being Jewish, as we look at this Shabbat and we think about the last week, is to say no, no, no. When people say mean, hateful things about us or about anyone else, to say no, what you're saying isn't true. No, what you're saying to people is a lie. No, that trying to get people to think something that isn't right is wrong. And it doesn't matter if it's about another Jew, or about someone who's black, or someone who's Christian, or someone who's Muslim, or someone who's Hindu, that it is wrong. We could all do a better job of doing what our kids did. You cannot really fight irrational thought with rational thought. That doesn't work. There are lots of people who believe what they believe and they're wrong, and it's irrational. There's no logic attached to it. But we can use our words. We can say no. We can fight for what is right. And all of us could really use a little bit more Torah in creating what I hope we continue to become, which is an army of good doers. Good doing people. What do we call that in Judaism? Tzedek, tzadakim, righteous people. To be righteous is to be right. So on this Shabbat, as we've had a very tough week, but also a very beautiful, wonderful beginning to our Shabbat, let's all commit to being better tzadakim, to going out into our world and doing what's right and being righteous, to saying no when we see something wrong and calling people out on it, and saying yes to life, to Torah, to God, and to the spirit of our ancestors who had adversity also and who lived through very hard times as well, but got to the other side, and here we are thousands of years later celebrating their accomplishments and our accomplishments in being that Or LaGoyim, that light to the nations. May we be and continue to be a light in a very dark world. And to our kids, you are beaming lights, and you have made our week so much better. You and your saying no was the antidote to all the bad stuff that we saw this last week. So thank you all. Shabbat shalom.